Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another positive talk. Hopefully, you all had a great weekend and a great start to a new week. Super excited to be bringing another coach that I met through the Jay Shetty program onto another positive talk for you all. Uh, Hopefully, we'll be diving into a lot of interesting topics that you all will like. Let's see. I will invite. Here we go. Hello.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let's see if I can get my camera tilted in the right direction so I'm in frame. Looks like you're all set. So first thing, I would love to have you introduce yourself so people know who you are, and then we can kind of dive into a conversation because you and I have already had an amazing conversation off live, but I'd love to have you introduce yourself, and then we can kind of share some of the stuff we talked about.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Nikki. I'm a mental health coach. I actually went through the Jay Shetty program as well, the certification program. And I came about being a mental health coach because of my own mental health challenges. So I work with families who have a child, specifically a teen, who's struggling with their mental health. And that's because that was about the same time as when I noticed some changes within myself. And I wish I had the resources that I can now offer to others. So I try to be something that I didn't have.
I love it. I That's kind of very similar to what guided me to becoming a coach as well. I feel like when it came to the person that I was when I was younger, I wish that there was a mentor that understood me a little bit more than the ones that were in place. But I'm excited to dive into this conversation because I think it's a really important one. I think that mental health is something that should be at the forefront of everyone's mind in conversation, whether it's your own mental health or the people around you that you love, or just respecting people around us that are navigating the world differently than ourselves. Because I think that on my journey of understanding mental health, whether it be my own or people around me, that was the journey that I had to go on, was understanding it's different for everyone.
So true. So true.
So when it came to your journey, would you like to tell us a little bit about that so people can take a deep dive and understand that perspective?
Yeah, for sure. So gosh, the way I went about it is completely backwards. I'll tell you, I missed every sign, every symptom, everyone around me did, because I was really good at masking it. I was really good at just pushing through, and I think that was the athlete in me. So, backstory, I played sports my whole life. I ended up playing basketball at Washington State University. And it was that change that kind of was the catalyst for a lot of my mental health challenges. I dealt with trauma as a child, grew up in a difficult household, but it was that change of moving from San Diego to Washington on my own that I think really got that stress pumping in me that I didn't know what to do with. And on top of that, I was expected to be at weights at 6 o'clock, one-on-ones at 7 o'clock, 3 o'clock practice, go to class in between that, 8 o'clock weights. Like we had stuff all day scheduled out for us as athletes. And I think that's something that people don't realize is that when you're a college athlete, it's almost more than being a professional athlete because you have to go to school too. And you're younger and you're still kind of getting acclimated to everything. So I struggled through college. I say, I got by. Thankfully, I did well. But after that, I became a sports reporter, which again, television, high stress, right? Like difficult positions, working crazy hours, traveling. Not to mention some of the seedy things that do go on in television sometimes that we don't like to talk about. But dealt with that, and then kind of a trigger warning in 2004, I was facing a huge sexual harassment lawsuit. It was a really difficult time. My father also discovered he had prostate cancer. Again, I didn't have the tools. I didn't know how to cope with these things. And so instead of reaching out, I went inward. and I just, got into a shell. I didn't sleep. This is, starting to really see manic episodes coming on, but no one was able to identify that. So in 2004, I attempted to take my life for the first time. And at that time, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But the problem was, I was in a maximum security facility, which I looked around and I said, well, I'm not like these people. I kind of separated myself. Like, I'm not that. I'm high functioning. So I kind of put myself on this separate pedestal of that's not me. And so when I was suggested to continue on with some sort of treatment, I ignored it. Totally ignored it. I'm going to keep on with my life. That was just a mistake. 10 years later, fast forward, I am now, in a relationship, a serious relationship. I've actually just gotten married. It was a year after getting married, and things were spiraling again. I had been unemployed for a while, couldn't really hold a job because I was unreliable, because every time after a manic episode, I would crash and I'd get sick. People couldn't depend on me. And so a year after, in 2014, tried to take my life again. That time, I was almost successful. It was really just me putting up the white flag of like, I need help. And so I was in the hospital for several days. I was in a coma for several days. And it was like something finally stuck that I need help. I need help, and I need drastic help immediately. And so I listened and I went to the doctors, and I was really set on, if I wanted to be married, if I wanted to have a family, if I wanted to have a successful life, I had to listen to the experts. And so I finally did. I bought in, which was really hard for this critically minded woman, because I am always like, "Are you sure? Let me fact check that and everything else." But I did. I bought in. It'll be 10 years in December that I've been medicated, in recovery, and stable. And so in that time, I started sharing my story very early on in recovery, just a little bit. And I noticed every time I shared my story, someone was impacted, whether it was they had an aunt who had bipolar, or a cousin, or they themselves were dealing with their own challenges. And so when I opened up, it just opened up this, room for conversation. And as I started talking to more and more people, I realized, well, maybe I can do something with this. And then as an athlete, coaching really resonated with me, because I'm like, well, I was coached. I like coaching. That's the way for me, because I like goals. And I felt like a lot of treatment that I had tried was very much of like, let's pick apart your past. Let's see where things went wrong in the past. I'm like, I don't care. I know where it went wrong. We already saw that, like, I don't need to worry. It's good to know and understand, don't get me wrong. But for me, I wanted to see, how can I be successful in my future? And that was when I started looking at coaching. And a lot of my therapy was through cognitive behavioral therapy, was a lot of, goal oriented exercises and things that you could control, things that you could work on. And so I've taken all that, and like I said, it'll be 10 years in December. So that's the long path I took to get here.
Yeah, I love it. And thank you for sharing that. I know that being vulnerable on the internet comes with all types of rewards, but sometimes it puts you in front of people who don't understand, or just have closed minds when it comes to understanding people who are different. I know that one of the topics you and I had talked about was when it came to me communicating with people who were dealing with depression or anxiety, that a lot of what they were talking about seemed very similar to things that I understood as well, like stresses and things that I was going through. And when it came to having the conversation, for me, one of the tactics that I used, and I was trying to explain to someone, oh, you just have to do this. It comes off very simple as someone trying to help, but in a situation where someone's dealing with bipolar or depression or anxiety, their stories may sound similar to us when we hear them, but when it comes to the way that their brain connects to the problem and how it can spiral in different ways is very different. So it's really important for people to understand that. And then once you are diagnosed or understand the disorder or mental health condition that you're connected to, it's understanding that and then how you have to navigate the world differently instead of looking at it as a problem, just looking at it as, okay, I have to navigate a little differently, I have to make a little bit different choices to kind of continue forward. But when it came to the person that you were before you were diagnosed and before you accepted help, like when it comes to the mindset that you had of I'm normal, I'm not like those other people. And then now when you're like, okay, this feels so much better. I'm in a place where I can say that I'm a lot happier now. What do you think that transition was for you, and how like other people can kind of start gearing themselves for that transition as well?
The transition is a difficult one because I will tell you, I resisted it, right? You know, in therapy, I didn't see the end goal. I didn't think it was possible. I just felt different because I was now medicated, and that totally changed my mindset. There was a lot of things. First and foremost, I had to deal with were the side effects, some of the side effects that came with the medication, just the way it changed my ability to think. Plus, I was no longer able to have those, you know, times of mania, which back then were actually pretty good for me. Some people, when they experience mania, it's very detrimental. For me, my mind worked overtime with creativity. Some of my best artwork came at that time. Some of my best writing came at that time. So for me, it was like losing a part of myself. So I had to mourn that loss, right? I had to take that time, mourn that loss, and then realize, who can I be now? What can I do now that's different from that? And I had to remind myself why constantly. Why am I doing this? I had my why posted literally in my closet, which was, I wanted a family. We were talking about having a child. We were talking about, you know, a lot of things that needed my stability. And I never wanted or want to be that parent who can't be present because of my own mental health challenges. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not perfect. I even lately, I mean, we've been, you know, ripping and running because it's summertime, and I'm getting a little tight and a little tense. And I noticed that within myself. And I noticed that, you know, I snapped at my son because he wanted to watch TV. Those are things that happen with everyone, right? We all go through that. But it's managing that. And so I found that once I mourned that loss of who that previous person was, now I could focus on who I was going to be. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It took me years to get through that. And to have someone, my therapist was amazing. She's like, I promise one day you won't miss the old you. And I had to, again, I had to buy in. And that's the biggest thing. You have to buy in if you want change, whether it's coaching, whether it's with your mental health, anything, you have to buy in. You know, I tell some of my clients, if you went out to basketball practice and you just stood there and the coach is telling you what to do and you just stood there, do you think you're going to play? No. You got to participate. You got to be, you know, a part of the change, a part of the growth. And I think that's what really helped me, is that mindset of, okay, what's the end goal? What do I need to do to get there? This is it. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. I know that when we spoke before, one of the big challenges you talked about was when it comes to working with someone who has been sold so many different solutions and have yet to find a solution that works. One of the things that you work with people through is getting them to accept yet one more solution that might work for them. And I know just from the amount of information I pull in on a daily basis for whatever problems I may be searching on the internet, that it can be overwhelming when you've got so many people saying, I've got the solution, and it's a problem you want to solve. You try this solution, it doesn't give you the results. You start to feel that hopelessness of, I'm I'm never going to be fixed, or I'm never going to feel better. I'm stuck in this, and you start to kind of accept that point. How, like, what's your journey been on, like, getting people to kind of understand, like, you got to keep trying until you find that solution that works.
I think a lot of that comes from my own experience. I've been to more than 20 psychiatrists in my life, mental health hospitals, all sorts of things. And I was a skeptic and I never bought in. I think one, it's making a connection, like just on a totally, bottom level, making a connection with someone, so that they trust that, to open up, to be vulnerable. Because, like you said, it's not easy to do. And then just offering, when I offer some of myself, of my experiences, it doesn't have to be about their experiences, but they can at least understand that I can understand a little bit. I have been there. And then it's finding the right path for them that will best help them. Because I think a lot of times in mental health, it's very standardized. You come in, you're a number. This is what we do to help everyone in this position. This is how it's going to work. You should expect this, this, and that. That's not the case. Everyone's mental health challenges are different. Everyone's mental health struggles or disorders are different, and we all process things differently. We even process the way medication reacts differently. Not many people have the same medication cocktail, so to speak. So it's really just listening and then understand what they're going through, but really diving into finding the right path for them. What works best for them? The athletes I work with, I know I can push them a little different. They're athletes. Maybe the non-athletes, it's finding what really gets their fire, and just understanding. So I think it starts with listening, and treating each one as an individual is so important. And not just, well, this is the textbook on what fixes this, and that's what we're going to go with. No, we're like we're doing right now, having a conversation. And then you take from that and see what path we can go from.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things we also talked about, which I can totally relate to, is when it comes to spaces that are very geared towards a specific person. A lot of times things are very created for white, straight men with Christian backgrounds, and everyone else has to kind of sit there and try to translate it in their mind of how it applies to them. So when it comes to the coaching realm, when it comes to the mental health realm, and knowing that you kind of checked a lot of boxes off when it came to like the minority statuses on your journey, like how has that impacted your ability to kind of connect to yourself through processes and books and things that are out there to help? Because I know for me, there have been spaces where being part of the LGBT community, it's almost like there's that extra hurdle you have to climb
Mm-hmm.
before you can even start the things that they're talking about working on. And sometimes it's like, where's that
Yeah.
teacher or where's that coach to help me over this hurdle so I can start catching up to all these other people working on what I would like to work on?
Yeah, definitely. Because for me, that was another hurdle. You're right. So I grew up, mixed black and white in a basically all white school. So there you go. I stand out. I'm different. And then I started feeling different in college. Then I start, questioning my sexuality. Then I'm having mental health issues. It's like, what's next? So you kind of have to like take those things one at a time. And it's, again, this is a way for me to relate to others of like, hey, I know what it's like to be different. I know what it's like to stand out in a room. I know what it's like to have challenges, especially in today's society where we're expected to fit the mold. And I do not fit a mold at all, like not even a little bit. And so I understand that. And I think that was, what I see is how it got in the way of me getting help. And so I try to offer ways that it doesn't get in the way of others getting help, and just again offering resources. I had no idea there wasn't a lot of information at this time when I was going through these challenges. I didn't have the resources that are available today. The thing is, a lot of people don't know where those resources are, so still to this day. So I can bring those to them, and then kind of shorten that gap of them being able to attain the knowledge that they need to make them realize that they don't need to fit a mold either. We're going to work on them as a person, what they need, and it's about their goals. I'm not making up somewhere where I want them to be. I don't want them to, feel like they need to be this person. No, what are you looking to do with your life? How can we get you there?
Yeah. I love that. And I think when it comes to people who didn't fit many of the molds that are out there, I think that when it came to like 2020 and the pandemic and everything that happened to us from that point on, I think that there are a lot of people who started to kind of fall apart and
Mhm.
realize that none of us really fit a mold in general. And a lot of times it's just we can convince ourselves,
Yeah.
whether it's by all the distractions, Netflix, going out to your Starbucks, shopping. The pandemic kind of ripped all of that away to where most people finally had the time to sit and look at themselves in the mirror and ask the question, like, who am I?
Yeah.
Whereas people in the minority groups, we've been forced to stare at a mirror that says you're different or you don't belong or you're not the same. And when it came to other people during the pandemic, when they finally sat down and asked the question of who I am or who am I, it was a question that added a lot of stress for a lot of people. Whereas I found that a lot of people who have dealt with being stereotyped or looked down upon or looked at differently, that journey was a little bit easier for them because it's a journey you've probably been on a
Yeah.
lot longer. It didn't start March of 2020.
Yeah. Well, 20, you're right about the 2020 was actually when I started going to certification, Jay Shetty certification school, because it was exactly that. And I think prior, so for me, when I would experience mania, I would be moving so fast that I had no awareness. I wouldn't realize that I was talking over people. I wouldn't realize that I wasn't showing up where I was supposed to be because I was moving so fast. When I was depressed, I was moving too slow. So there was no awareness again because I'm just like, oh man, I'm in my own. Now I started getting better. Well, then 2020 hit, and I'm like, well, I don't have the mania or depression to kind of deal with now. I've got to actually deal with where I am right now and be aware. And so it was through that that I literally had that conversation of, I think I can help people. I think my story may be able to help people. And the more I kind of convinced myself of that, I was able to go to school and figure it out. And there wasn't really a template for being a mental health coach. I kind of just made that up. I'm that term, like I'd heard it here, different things, mental health advocate, whatever. But I was like, no, that I'm going to help people by coaching their mental health. A lot of people, a psychiatrist, they've got 15, 30 minutes maybe to spend with them to talk about their medication. A therapist, usually typically 50 minutes, but in that time, they want to usually talk about your past, your childhood, what brought you here. Again, so coaching, I felt, was a way for me to help others. But you're right, in 2020, and I think that's why a lot of people are talking about mental health. It's not just the effects of the epidemic in terms of, how did it affect us, but it was that moment we had to stop. We had to stop with all of our distractions. We had to stop running. I know as a mom, that's all I do. I run around, I'm taking someone somewhere and this and that. Everything stopped. So we had to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah. And I feel like the being honest with ourselves is like a journey everyone's got to go on eventually. The world makes it a little easier for some just because it kind of creates the mold that they can easily fit into if they'd like, but no one's really meant to fit into a mold. And when it comes to the journey of determining, okay, this is who I am, this is what my life has given me, when it comes to your support system and the people around you, how important is it for them to be understanding and part of that journey of you learning about yourself? Because I think that in general, that's something that partners are a part of. They're
Yeah.
part of your life and they learn about the things that you have to do to kind of navigate.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's any relationship. But when it comes to dealing with mental health and knowing that there are times where you're going to need more support than maybe you're able to provide, how do you kind of navigate that with the people around you?
We've gone through a lot. So I'll be going 10 years in recovery. We had 10 years married. And my wife was there for all of it. She saw, we were together 5 years prior to my attempt to take my life. But um, she was there. She held my hand the first day we went to the doctor, and we figured it out. Um, and in the beginning, it was a lot of just kind of her understanding what bipolar is as a whole, what to look for, all those things. It was kind of big picture stuff. Then a couple years in, we started realizing we got to get down to the nitty gritty of communication, because a lot of times, if I'm in a bad mood, if I'm hypomanic and everything irritates me and sounds irritate me and I can't sleep at night, sometimes I'm not good at waving the flag and say, hey, I'm not doing good over here. But she is able to recognize it. 2 weeks ago, I started going, really fast, moving fast, talking fast. And it was 2 years ago, July 4th, I had my last psychotic break. I wasn't hospitalized, thankfully, but I did have a really bad episode. And she, leading up to the 4th of July, she said, you're talking really fast. You're moving really fast. Now, immediately, I wanted to be like, what are you talking about? You don't know. I'm fine, right? But I had to, after the years we've worked together on this, we've gone to couples counseling to really strengthen our communication. We've done a lot. We've really put the work in, and I think that's just it with anything. If you want it, you got to put in the work. It's not going to just happen. We're not going to, everyone always talks about marriage as work. It is, and that's not a bad thing. It's not bad to work hard at something that you enjoy. I'm learning to play the ukulele. I have to work hard at that to try to learn how to play it. So it's, if you want something bad enough, you'll do it. But yeah, we went through counseling. We had some moments, some difficult moments, but luckily we've come together and we have put our family first, our son. We really, pride ourselves on trying to keep as stable as a household as we can. Obviously, couples are going to argue. We're going to have that. I think that it would do him a disservice if we didn't, because he should see that couples don't always agree, but he should also see how we make up, how we move on, how we don't hold on to a grudge. Those are all things I didn't do well. I would hold on to a grudge. I would silent treatment. That's not right. I would, all sorts of things like that. But we work together, and now we can call each other out on our stuff. And it's not, an argument starter. It's a, hold on, okay, let's create awareness. And I think that's the biggest change.
Yeah, I love that. And I saw a quote like right before we jumped on here where it said something along the lines of, when you're in an argument with your partner, it's not you versus them, it's you both versus the problem.
Mm.
And I was just like, that's such a beautiful way to look at it, because even in moments where you're sitting there like frustrated because maybe your partner did something that is upsetting, it's still the both of you versus the problem. And when you look at it that way, it's almost like you can lay the problem out on the table and stand side by side and be like, okay, how do we solve this together? Because together we're a team and we can solve any problem as long as we're together. And I was just like, yeah, that's how the most effective couples kind of navigate through problems, because it's never one or the other person. Yes, you can screw up. Yes, there can be mistakes made. But if you always take the problem off the person and lay it out and say, okay, how do we solve this problem together? It kind of creates that relationship with you where you can build those strong relationships. And communication is definitely required on that journey.
Yeah, and it's kind of using those I statements, right? Of like, I feel this, I'm experiencing this, not you did that, or it's taking that and you're right, laying it on the table, and this is what I'm feeling right now. And we always try. She played softball in college as well, so we always try to kind of take things on like the team mentality of that we're on the same team, and we're doing things for the greater good. And for me, kind of going back, I finding that change, understanding that the things that I did in the past weren't, conducive to me being successful, and changing that, that's what led me here to be, doing well. A lot of people, sometimes they look at their life and they're like, I want to change, but they keep still doing the same things that they were doing. And that's the hard part, is you got to let go of that. You've got to let go of the things that you did because they weren't successful for you. And if we put it in times, in idea of like business, say sales, you're cold calling, you're getting nothing. Okay, well, let's start a new way. It's not that that was bad, it just wasn't working for you. And so you find a new way to make things happen.
Yeah. Test drive something new and hope
Yeah,
that that's the problem solver. And if not, grab something else and test drive that until you figure it out. You
yeah,
can't keep playing the same thing on repeat and getting frustrated that it's not working because
right,
it's like, okay, but we knew that. We tried that last week and it didn't work. What made this week any different?
exactly. Yeah.
So I know that at the beginning you talked about how your goal is to kind of work with people in the age range of like teenagers. And when it comes to parents, a lot of times when it comes to generational trauma, trauma is passed down. And becoming an adult myself, I learned that, wow, my mom did a lot of crazy stuff to like make sure that my childhood was the way that it was. When it comes to a parent who probably has a world of their own problems to navigate, especially with the economy and politics and all the movements going on in today's world, that's probably a lot of weight on the parent's shoulders already. But when it comes to a parent and child's relationship, when it comes to mental health, maybe the parents experienced it before, maybe they haven't. Maybe the child is starting to experience signs of it and are going through the typical teenager
Yeah.
years are difficult enough.
Hmm.
When you throw mental health into the mix, it's a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is the best way for parents and their children to kind of navigate the understanding of, okay, we need to figure out something new to do because this isn't working?
So my son is 7. Since the he was 1 or 2, since he could walk, we had an emotion chart in his room. Before he could even talk, he would take us to the emotion he was feeling and point to it to let us know. Usually it was sad or whatever because he wasn't getting what he wanted. But either way, we tried to connect that feeling to the word. What is he feeling? Because I think for my generation, we weren't given the opportunity to understand our feelings. I was told many times to stop crying or I give you something to cry about, and that's so cliche, but it literally was told to me many times. So for me, that became the beginning of me trying to stifle my, a natural emotion. So I think giving kids the arena to feel what they feel and, honor that. And instead of trying to negate it, it's just like pain. If someone's in pain, you can't say, no, you're not. You can't feel their pain. Like, how can you tell them they're not in pain? So it's the same idea of understanding. And then realizing as they get into those teen years, yes, emotions are heightened, hormones are on overdrive, everything seems more tragic. It's just that's the case. But now you've established a relationship by this time. See, I've started with him when he was 1 or 2 talking about his emotions. By the time he gets to 16, this will be a normal conversation for him. It will not be something new where he doesn't know how to start that conversation and mom, I feel uncomfortable with this, or mom, I'm stressed out. He has that words, he has the language to use. And if you ask any of my clients, the biggest thing I talk about is awareness. Awareness, I think, is gold in terms of mental health because it's being aware of what you're feeling. It's being aware of how to explain that. It's being aware of what created that. When you're able to have that awareness and you're able to look back at things and say, oh, okay, this is what led me to here, rather than just going through it. And that's what, as a child, I mean, I came home, I was a latchkey kid from the time I was 4. So I had a lot of alone time. In that alone time, I wasn't expressing my feelings to anyone. I wasn't sharing. I was just navigating my own little world. So what I did, again, as I want to offer teens what I didn't have, I want to offer my son what I didn't have, which is the ability to have a high emotional IQ and to be able to, it's not something scary to feel those big feelings.
Yeah. I've constantly told people that I wish there was like a parenting 101 and like every 5 years the parents would go
Yeah.
in and kind of be filled in a little bit about how you can navigate things, because when it comes to being a parent, like there are a lot of things that we can accidentally do to
Oh yeah.
block a communication route that a child would have with us if we didn't do something. And I think that it's really important for people to understand that those types of relationships can be healed, but it requires the parents to do some healing of their own. I know that when it comes to some parents, there's the guilt, there's shame,
Yeah.
there's lots of different things that they have to heal within themselves to be able to connect to their child in that way. Because to be able to connect on emotional level, you first have to be able to do it with
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
And if you haven't been able to do it with yourself, then good luck trying to navigate the waters of connecting to someone else's emotions, because I mean, that's what makes any relationship with another human being so difficult, is because we're complex and unique individuals that any trigger in our lives can make us see the world completely different than the person standing right next to us. So, understanding how important communication is and doing the work of pushing through, because at some point you start to become like the helicopter parent where the kid's like, get away, I
Yeah.
don't want you here, stop,
Yeah.
it's my life. But it's still important, because even in those years, your kid will need to be able to communicate with you, because their fellow students that they're around are probably all confused and dealing with it as well. So when it comes to being a parent and taking the time to educate yourself enough to have those conversations in a way that the child feels understood and seen, I always tell people, like, it's the parents' jobs to create space of protection for the child to explore the world and understand themselves better. But so often I feel like parents try to morph them into like little mini me's
Oh
of
yeah.
themselves,
Yes.
which the world doesn't need. We need everyone to be unique. And that's a hard job to do, because
Yeah.
our fears as adults, we're so scared that that will happen to our child that we try to protect them and craft them into a version that we think will protect them from these things we've experienced. But at the end of the day, it's not doing them any good by doing that.
Yeah, and I think for so long, a lot of parents wanted to be friends with their kids, because there was so much turmoil in the household for earlier generations. So they wanted peace. Let's be friends, and everything, seemed okay as long as the kid got their way. And so the conversations that we have are not only, let's talk about emotions and everything, but also structure, and the fact that, one, I'm your parent, so I am going to, there is structure in that way. However, I am not always going to be perfect. I remind him that all the time. Look, I'm imperfect. I may make the wrong call. We can have that open conversation, and we have that level of respect where he is heard, but also I am the mom. And we know that being a child of, same-sex marriage, that people are going to find ways to pick at him. I mean, kids pick on anyone really, but they'll find little things, and we want him to be resilient. And I think resilience is something that's forgotten a lot in kids, is that it's okay for things to happen to kids. That's okay. It's their ability to be resilient and to bounce back that we need to help them with.
Yeah. And I think that when it comes to letting them connect to their emotions in such a pure way and validating, because I was watching a podcast once and they're like, what happens when like a baby cries? And it's like everyone's like, shh, like they don't want intense emotions. They like try to silence emotions. When a child hurts themselves, like we want them to stop. Like we don't want them to make a scene. We don't want them to cry. But in all actuality, like what you were saying before with your own childhood, like you need space to have those validated, so that when you do fear something, it's validated, because more likely it was meant to be fearful for a reason. Maybe it
Right.
was for safety purposes. But a lot of kids, their emotions are not discussed. I mean, as a coach today that works with adults, there's a lot of adults that can't label their
Yeah.
emotions. They have very, very limited verbiage for their emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that's from childhood not being able to express or communicate, to where they had to hold in a lot. So a lot of times sadness is one of them, or anger, but those
Mhm.
are kind of the only ones that they understand in a way. And it's kind of digging past those and finding the deeper emotions that are actually there.
Yeah.
They've just never been allowed to be communicated.
Yeah. It's so true. And parents, really, it's our job to give them that verbiage, to offer that to them, so they can take it and decide, does this work for me or not? But if it's not there for them to pick from, then they don't know. And so they stifle it, they stuff it down, or they're not able to even understand their emotions. That was me. I didn't even understand. If someone was said, what are you feeling right now? I don't know. Are you upset? I don't know. Because I did not know, and I wasn't trying to be rude or anything. I just literally didn't have the words for what I was feeling. Now I have learned to articulate those where I can understand, like, oh, you know what? Today I woke up, I'm a little cranky. But that's okay. I can get through the day. But it's acknowledging it and then moving on instead of stifling it, because it's gonna come out eventually. It's gonna rear its head. But if I can say, I'm cranky today, now in my mind, if I see things that maybe I would have blown up at, I'm like, you know what? Let me take that easy, because I already know that I am on, step 2 to getting cranky step 5. Like, right? So it's just understanding where you are. Again, it's awareness.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, like I know how I feel when I show up late to things.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So I'm one of those people who I plan to be super early just because I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be late, so I'd rather be early. So what do I have to do in the morning to make sure that I am on time for being early?
Mhm.
And then when it comes to traffic or an accident or something that may slow traffic down to where I don't get to the location on time, I can kind of go through the motion of, okay, I've still got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm good. I still have plenty of time. But I knew that the anxiety and stuff that I would feel if I was late beforehand. So I adjusted my schedule to kind of
Yeah.
accommodate not getting myself into a situation where my anxiety would skyrocket. So it's like important to kind of know and understand
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
to be like, okay, like there were days when I had really long days and I had enough with people, but I knew that I had lived with my sister and my nephew, and I knew my sister was home with my nephew all day, so she wanted to talk to an adult when I got home. I knew my nephew was playing by himself all day, so he wanted to play with his uncle. So on my car ride home, I mentally prepared myself by
Mhm.
doing something positive. If it was a podcast I'd listen to, a book, or just upbeat music, and did what I needed to do to clear my head because I knew that taking it out on them was not appropriate because it's not their fault that I had a rough day.
Yeah.
But it's like I look back and I saw days where I snap on my nephew who just wanted to play, and it's like, ooh, I'm letting my adult stresses be taken out on a kid. And being able to apologize and say, sorry, I did not mean that. I just had a really rough day. It's not your fault. You didn't deserve that. And then healing that relationship so that it doesn't become a relationship where they're expecting you to be that angry person all the time.
And how amazing that you apologize to a kid. A lot of people don't think that that's necessary. Why should I? They're a kid. Why should I apologize to them? But really, now you have established where one, he, gets an understanding of it, but now he can empathize. Now he can understand. So if you are in that moment again, there's no taking it personal. Maybe a kid can't do that immediately, but there's that opportunity for that. So kudos to you for, reflecting and being able to say that, because I apologize all the time to my kid, and I hear people, they're like, they're a kid. Why are you gonna say something? Like, I messed up. I'm an adult, but I messed up. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah. I'll even apologize to my dog. Like if
I
I
do too.
like if he gets super excited and like jumps on me when I'm like not in the mood and I yell at him or smack him in the face for it, I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like I did not mean that. You just got me at a really bad time." And he's just looking at me and I'm like, "Yeah.
That's
I had a moment. I'm really sorry about that." But
good.
I think it's important to apologize. And even as an adult now, looking back at my childhood, like having to kind of heal the traumas that I accumulated from misinterpreting the world around me, because no one took the time to explain to me it wasn't my fault for certain things, or
Yeah.
this event that I did not trigger this event over here. Because as a child, you kind of don't have the full scope of how the world works. So
Yeah.
your translation of it may translate something that's has nothing to do with your action. Like I was told to go to bed and I didn't go to bed. And now this happened and it had nothing to do with you not going to bed. But as a child, you connect. I did something bad
Hmm.
happened. Um, and when it comes to what you were talking about before, having that open conversation, if you create a safe space, like your child will come to you and be like, I'm so sorry I didn't go to bed. I didn't mean to cause this problem. And that would be your time to be like, oh,
Yeah.
it had nothing to do with you. It's not your
Yeah.
fault. It's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that we're getting close to the end of the hour, but I wanted to give you time to kind of share who you would like to help as a coach. If there's anyone out there that may have ideal clients that they could send your way, I would love to give you an opportunity to kind of speak on the person that you would like to help the most. I know we've kind of touched on it here and there, but I
Mhm.
wanted to give you some space to actually share a little bit more.
Thank you. For me, the critical age right now is 13 to 18. The reason why is they were all affected at a young age for, during 2020. They're 4 years ago. So either 9 through, middle puberty, teenage years. So families are struggling right now because they've got teenagers who either they feel, have anxiety because the kids are using big words, or they're depressed and they're going off of these words that they hear, but what does that mean? And so they don't know where to go from there. The parents don't know what doctor to take them to, or their kid won't go to a doctor, or do they need medication? Does my insurance work? There's so many questions around mental health. So for parents, one, I want to offer that there is a way to help your child if they need medication in addition to that medication. If they don't need medication, it's a way to get them on track and give them the skills, the tools that they need to continue on and have a successful life. Things like finding a job, finishing school. Parents are struggling to make that happen and they don't know what to do. For parents, there's that communication issue where they don't even understand their child. Their child won't talk to them. They're trying to do their best. They don't know. And so, what I can do is not only help your child or help their child with their mental health, but help the parents understand and how to be a better advocate for their child. Because a lot of parents don't know how to advocate for their child. They don't know how to offer an environment that may help them, heal. So it's two parts. It's families that are really just struggling and they don't know what to do. And maybe they've tried other things. Maybe, their backs are against the wall and nothing's worked. And what coaching does is it's not some crazy idea that people coaching is just as simple as coaching a team, but it's coaching someone to their goal. And so if the parent's goal for the kid is different than the kid's goal for themselves, well, we focus on what's that kid's goal, because that's going to get them to their parent's goal, not vice versa. And that's what happens. Parents try to set, you need to do this, this, and that, and the kid meanwhile is like, well, I don't really want to do that. I want to do this over here. How can we make those meet in the middle? Well, we gotta appease the kid, help them get better, help them understand, but then help the parents understand. And so it's two-part with that. But I think there's so many people that are struggling because every time, I mention what I'm doing, either it's that person's family, they've got a kid that's struggling, it's, a friend's family, please, can you talk to them? And you'd be, surprised at how many people are struggling behind closed doors. They seem that they're fine, maybe they're at soccer practice with their family and they happen to hear what I do. They're like, oh my gosh, please, I have an older, kid who's at home and I can't get them to get off the couch or get off their phone or get off social media. And all those things aren't the problem. there's an underlying problem, and that's what we need to get to. Because if you understand that problem, all those other things will fall to the side. So I just offer to any families who are struggling, let's talk. Completely, first call's free to figure it out. Are we a match? Are we not? Can I help you? Maybe not. I don't know, but most likely I can.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you kind of brought to the front that like the pandemic put a lot of people like I thought a lot about my sister who was graduating college. Her last years of college were like through the pandemic. There were people who didn't get to experience the last years of that. I didn't think about all the people who kind of existed through elementary school and going into middle school, these like big transitional
Mhm.
moments in our lives as children. And they did it through a pandemic where the world was flipped upside down, where our teachers were scrambling to figure out how to turn everything virtual. Our parents were figuring out how to house children when they had to go to work, or how do they connect with their loved ones who were older or had illnesses where they couldn't get physically close